Welcome back, football fans. Liverpool makes the biggest transfer this summer with Florian Wirtz coming to Liverpool. Of course, everyone's talking about it. The one big thing people are talking about is the money. This is considered the most expensive transfer in the Premier League history. Obviously, Wirtz signing in 2025 with 136 euros. Under that, you had Enzo Fernandez, 2022 with 121. Jack Grealish, 2021 with 118. Declan Rice, 2023, 117. And Moses Caicedo, 2023 with 116. Let's look at these a little closer and break it down. So, Florian Wirtz coming to Liverpool is coming off of back-to-back years, I think, as the German League Player of the Year. So obviously showing consistency, being a great player for the national team, and being a dominant player in the German League, leading his team to the league title, going undefeated that season, something that Bayern Munich has never been able to achieve. Under that, you have Enzo Fernandez, right? We've seen Enzo and how he's worked for Chelsea. And in truth, most people would say his performances have kind of been disappointing based on the huge amount of money that Chelsea paid for him. His signing came, of course, off of a great international tournament, playing with a great Argentinian team, where obviously he really shone and was a great part of a historical midfield. But the team itself was fantastic, meaning that he had a lot of opportunity to showcase himself because he had such great talent around him. At Chelsea, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to look nearly as good or as comfortable, right? And there's really been kind of an issue about where to play him in the squad. Then, of course, you have Jack Grealish, who, was signed. Obviously, this was a domestic signing, so the price was a little higher than it probably should have been. Him coming from a team that had never really done anything fantastic, so him putting up great numbers on a mid-tier team in England is what you would expect, right? He was the star player on a mid-term team. Man City grabbed him, and really we have to say that he's been very disappointing. So much so that he won't be coming back to Man City next year. So getting signed in 2021, in 2025, he's no longer going to be part of the team. So you can see Man City really didn't benefit from spending $118 million on Jack Grealish. Enzo Fernandez, has played okay, but has he been worth the huge amounts of money that Chelsea paid for him? Then you get to Declan Rice. Obviously, he was signed after playing a very strong role for the English team, being a solid midfield player for one of the best teams in the world. Coming to Arsenal, giving them what they need, a secondary midfielder to allow their more flamboyant midfielder the opportunity to be aggressive, knowing that he had a very good player behind him. Declan Rice has played very well. Played well internationally, has played very well for Arsenal. But his role in Arsenal hasn't been specifically a defensive midfielder. He's been more of an 8, not really a 6. But all in all, we have to say that so far, that's been a pretty successful signing for Arsenal. The problem is, even with Declan Rice added to that squad, which obviously was one of the best teams in England, they've still have not been able to win anything. Meaning that this year, in the summer transfer window, they're going to be forced to spend hundreds of millions of dollars as well to try to upgrade their team to finally try to win something, to compete with obviously Liverpool, who just won this year, Chelsea, who is fast approaching with a very young team that has a lot of weapons, and of course Man City, who people do expect is going to obviously bounce back after Rodri gets back to the squad. Then we get to Moses Caicedo, a player that Liverpool was chasing as well and did offer him a huge sum of money. He chose to go to Chelsea We see how that's worked out. Obviously, coming to Liverpool would have been better because he would have won far more at Liverpool than he has so far at Chelsea. Him and Enzo Fernandez haven't really meshed very well together. It hasn't been the perfect sort of chemistry between the two of them. Moses Caicedo was a great player when he was playing for Brighton, but so far for Chelsea, he's been solid. But the other player that they signed that year for far less money seems to be probably a better player long term, at least in my opinion. You may disagree, but he's looked fantastic when I watched him play. It's unfortunate for Chelsea that he had so many injuries, which didn't allow him to be part of the midfield. Trying to play him and Castillo together doesn't really look like it works very well, especially when you add Fernandez into the mix. I hope it does. I'm not hating. I mean, I think that's a fantastic midfield on paper. The question is, how do they mesh together? When you spend $138, $39 million on two midfielders, and then another $70 million on another, almost $300 million on three players, you would hope that you're getting, if not the best midfield in English football, you're getting at least the second best midfield in English football. Liverpool, by exception, spent far less money to get Caicedo's teammate, spent less money to get Szoboszlai, and obviously got Gravenberch from Bayern Munich for far less money as well. I think the three of those players together was probably less than $120 million, maybe less than they paid for Enzo Fernandez. And that midfield has been probably the best midfield in England this past season. And now you add Florian Wirtz to the squad. Florian Wirtz, differing than these three players, is a far more versatile player. Enzo Fernandez was always seen as more of an offensive midfielder. Grealish, offensive, able to take you off the dribble and create. Declan Rice, more of a defensive midfielder. A good passer, able to connect the midfield to the attack. Moses Caicedo, a defensive midfielder with high energy, a guy that's just going to be a tornado, right? Florian Wirtz is a better offensive player than everybody that we listed here. He can take man on directly. He's been far more successful on a higher level so far at only 22 years of age than any of these players offensively. Defensively, he's I won't say he's better than Moses Caicedo, but I think he is as good or better than Fernandez, Grealish, and Declan Rice defensively. You can look at stats to confirm or counter that argument, but that's just my opinion so far. Feel free to tell me what you think. Also, obviously, he's young, coming into a new league. People say, oh, coming into a new league, this is an issue. Well, Enzo Fernandez obviously was the one guy who did come into the new league, and he's been, pretty successful. Grealish obviously was part of the English Premier League, and he's probably been the biggest bust out of all five of the players so far. Declan Rice has done well. Moses Caicedo, a little disappointing, right? And those are players that obviously came from the league. So I understand when people say that, but the reality of the situation is we've had plenty of players come from different leagues who've been super efficient and effective once they transferred to the English league. We've had plenty of players who came over and weren't, right? I mean, that's always the price you pay. You have to do your due diligence. You have to make sure a player has everything he needs to transition to a new league, to a new team, to a new system. And the great thing about Florian Wirtz, he's being handpicked by this Liverpool squad who had a great midfield as a replacement for Trent, to bring that offensive flair that obviously Liverpool is going to miss now that Trent is going to Real Madrid. They needed to sign somebody to take over for Trent, bringing that offensive flair, the ability to create something out of nothing. And so that forces their hand to spend maybe more money than they would have preferred. Because if you don't do that, potentially you're going to really affect your team and its success. You're going to stagnate the offense, and potentially every success you've built on, you're potentially going to end up losing out on. So you need to replace Trent with somebody that can bring that flair to the squad, and that's what they're doing by bringing Wirtz, right? And most people, by all accounts, thinks it's a fantastic addition. Anybody that's questioning or critical of it, primarily they're questioning the price tag. But as I just showed you, the other 4 players that have been paid huge amounts of money, or obviously the transfers were huge amounts of money, these players, for the most part, have so far all underachieved. So let's just keep it real. You know, we've seen this done multiple times by Chelsea, by Man City, by Arsenal. People obviously pointed out the fact that these teams spent so much money, but for the most part, they weren't as critical towards them as they have been so far to Liverpool, a team that for the most part doesn't overspend, a team that, you know, tends to do its business very efficiently. They don't overspend and throw out the cash like a Chelsea or a Man City historically have. Even a Man U, who has made some huge transfers, and for the most part, they've all blundered, right? Whether we're talking about Sancho, whether they're talking about the Dutch kid, you know, I mean, the amount of blunders that Man U have done in huge signings that have not worked out at all. I mean, you know, it shows you. Obviously, spending a lot of money to get players doesn't necessarily work unless the player fits into the system. And for Wirtz, we have to wait and see exactly how it works out, see if he is the player we think he is going to be. But when you look at some of the best players in the world today, and you look at everyone that's on that list, the only one that's listed is Florian Wirtz. He's up there with them all, Mbappe's, right? He's on that list with these players, these elite players, the juniors, right? And guys of that nature. Grealish, Declan Rice, Fernandes, Caicedo, none of those players are on that list. So it makes you feel a little more confident with the amount of money Liverpool spent on a player who is considered one of the best players in modern football by everybody that's making those lists. Will he be a potential superstar, the next Messi? Probably not, but it'll be interesting to see how good he does get, and how he benefits the Liverpool squad moving forward. As a Liverpool fan, obviously I'm super excited. I mean, I could not imagine getting a signing like this. Obviously, we know we went for Bellingham last year and ended up missing out on him. He chose to go to Real Madrid. He had one great year, and then last year was kind of a bit disappointing. Been a bit disappointing for England as well. And as a complete player, at this point, you have to kind of say that Wirtz looks like he's a more complete player than Bellingham. If we were to switch things and say, okay, now in hindsight, who would Liverpool prefer? Bellingham, Caicedo, you know, 2 other 100 million players that we were chasing after, and Wirtz. Would you prefer to have one of those other players instead of Wirtz? Let me know what you think. Would you prefer to have Bellingham instead of Wirtz or Caicedo? Because where I'm sitting right now, I think we made the right move. Obviously, teams were disappointed we didn't get the players we chased after in years past, but the way it's all worked out, I think this is a boom. It could not have worked out better. I don't think we could have got a better player, a more well-rounded player, a 2-foot offensive weapon, a guy defensively that is totally solid, a guy that brings the offensive flair. I don't think Jude Bellingham, Caicedo bring to the squad, not to the extent that Wirtz does, right? And then on top of that, you know, you think about Zubimendi last year, who we were in for, and I think would have been a great addition to our midfield already, which was already great, but you throw Zubimendi in with McAllister, Szoboszlai, and Gravenberch, and Zubimendi, and I mean, what an excellent midfield that would be. Now he's going to Arsenal, so he's going to be joining, obviously, Declan Rice and what's his face? Well, I can't think of his name. Starts with an O, more of an offensive flair player. And that team, that midfield looks great. You know, when I look at Arsenal and potentially what they're going to be next year, I'm excited. I know obviously I'm a Liverpool fan, but I'm excited when there's great talent in England. When Man City is representing, when Arsenal is representing, when Chelsea's representing, Man U, Tottenham, Newcastle. I think it just is excellent. It's entertaining football and obviously great entertainment as a fan of the English Premier League to have such great players and great teams representing. So I look forward to having great competition for Liverpool. And so seeing Zubimendi go to Arsenal, I think, wow, that's great. What a great midfield they're going to have next year. Like really, a great midfield. But I still going to be fanning for Liverpool. I do think that we are still going to win next year, and look for us to challenge PSG for Champions League next year. I think Wirtz is going to bring a whole new aspect to the team. And then when you talk about the width we're going to have, now that we have Wirtz's teammate, Frimpong, and obviously Kirkic joining on the other side, Szoboszlai's international teammate as well, the cohesion between these players that's already there. Szoboszlai's already worked with Kirkic for a lot of games, has a lot of experience with him. Obviously, Wirtz and Frimpong, these guys know each other backwards and forwards. So they're going to instantaneously mesh. Obviously, Salah is a veteran. You had great players around him. It's just going to make his life easier. Now that you have width and great creativity from Wirtz, it's just going to make Salah look that much better because he's going to have more opportunity to shine. He's going to have more room on the field, the pitch. And so in hindsight, it looks good. We have to wait for next year, but I'm super excited. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. When you think about all these historically large transfer fees that have been paid out to players in England, at the end of the day, which one of these transfers do you think is going to end up being the best?